Jonathan Rogers' interview with Kakao Games, Path of Exile 2 Early Access. I'm going to start with linking this in the Twitch chat. Do check it out. If you like the video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and leave a comment to help the algorithm, of course. This is a long one to strap in. I'm not sure if we'll post this on YouTube or not. We'll see. I got a bunch of React videos already. If it's good, you know, if it's a lot of stuff I can react to, like give some of my takes on it, we'll probably post it. But if not, let's just enjoy the video. I haven't seen this before. Let's check it out.
In Path of Exile 2, do you still need to go through all the acts every season?
Yes, you do. As I've always maintained, that I think it's a huge part of the reason why Path of Exile 1 still set its highest record of players in the most recent season. There's very few games that do that, and I think a lot of the reason is because if you want to have a game where you need to, I think it is important that you have a game where each new season you feel like you're on the level playing field with everyone else, and the moment that you don't have the need to go through the campaign again, then other players will feel left behind.
Oh, Jesus. Fucking hell, bro. Why would you have the intro thing be so much louder? Oh.
They did it. So what I decided to do was re-edit that interview with just the English parts. Hopefully be easier to watch. But there were some great answers in here, some great questions asked. I love the enthusiasm Jonathan has for these interviews. I've been watching all of them, and every time he asks him questions, not only does he light up when he gets asked these questions, he gives you such detailed responses that there's no doubt they know what they're doing with POE2, that it's going in the right direction, that you should be excited for the game.
I mean, that's something we can never take away from GGG. They want to make the game they want to make, and they listen to the community, but they don't like blindly just add whatever the community is asking for. They take it into consideration, and then they find a way to adapt it if possible. And if not, they just scrap it. They do what they want to do, and they've delivered high quality ever since.
If you like POE1, you should be excited. If you like POE1 and tried it and you couldn't get past the difficulty, you should be excited. Even just like action RPGs in general, you should be excited for what's going on with POE2. It's coming out next week. We're almost there. I think there's a few more interviews left to do. I think Zizzarin's is coming on December 3rd, which is probably going to be
December 2nd, right? The Sis interview is on December 2nd, right? It's tomorrow. Okay.
One of the more informative ones for new players. I think he's probably gonna revolve around, you know, league start and get people comfortable with the game and stuff like that, just because I don't think there's much left to ask. We've already got a good idea that a lot of it is new but still familiar because it's borrowing from a lot of Path of Exile 1 stuff. So I think a lot of the veterans, even though there's a lot of new ground to tread, we're not going to be, you know, out in the weeds. And a lot of new players, they're going to be able to easily get into the game because it seems like the entire focus is being around making sure that opening early game experience is very welcoming for the new players. Without further ado, the whole point of this video here is I'm going to be showing the Kakao video interview, edited, just the English portions. I'm not going to be talking over it too much, and at the end, I'm going to be talking about what I plan on doing with the channel when Path of Exile 2 comes out, and yeah, we'll go from there. Here we go. Enjoy the interview. I'm not going to be jumping in or pausing it, anything like that, but I will share my thoughts at the end, okay?
So what you've shown us already today is very memorable and it's very impressive. So we met in Gamescom, and so are you wearing the t-shirt very well, the tablet t-shirt that I gave you?
I have worn it a couple of times. You know, my wardrobe is almost entirely Path of Exile merchandise at this point. I don't think I have any t-shirts at all that don't have a...
He's so funny. So I met a lot of the streamers, right, on these different events. So I was talking to Crip about this. And some of the guys, myself included, I was like super hyped about some of the merchandise that we got. And Crip was like, eh. And I was like, bro, smile, man. Crip, don't be such a sourpuss. Smile, man. And he's like, yeah, it's cool. And it was like, bro, come on. It's like, you know, I've gotten so much merch, he told me. Like, it just piles up. And then, you know, I came home to my fiance and I looked at my wardrobe. I pulled out the drawer with all my t-shirts, and I could barely get the fucking thing open. And I realized 95% of my t-shirts is fucking merchandises for like different games, mostly PoE. I was like, you know, he's got a fucking point. It's at some point it gets kind of overkill.
The logo on.
So the trend now in action RPGs is we've seemingly transitioned.
I like Crip. Don't get me, like, I didn't mean that in the negative light. I love the man. Like we go way back with the ARPGs. I love the dudes. A big shout out to Crip, by the way.
From what we, maybe
But
call
he has a
Diablo likes
point.
into PoE likes, and to the point where other genres like roguelikes are also taking ideas from Path of Exile. And so with that in mind, how do you feel about that trend? And also, is it maybe just a little overwhelming that before PoE2 is even out, that there's this much attention?
I mean, it's certainly, I mean, look, I think that taking inspiration from other games is something that everyone should do. Like, you should always be looking at all of the different games, even in different genres, and seeing what kind of mechanics could be interesting to use. So, I mean, look, when we're designing new leagues for Path of Exile, we're always looking at, like what's a mechanic from some totally different genre we could potentially use in Q4. So I have absolutely no problem with people looking at the mechanics that we're doing and taking them from us as well. This is just how creativity in the game industry works.
Yes, it's like an ecosystem. And it's really good. Taking inspiration, not just from the same genre, from every games, and try to weave that in to create a masterpiece of what fits your game. They've always done this, and they've done a really good job with it. Something GG is really good at is taking risks. They tried a Total League, like an auto battler-ish, in an ARPG. They made a TD-ish of Blight. That is really sucks. Sorry, DM. I really, really can't stand Blight. But for some reason, there are a select few crazy people out there that actually like Blight. Like DM, for example. Not me.
Is we all share our ideas. Obviously, with the the launch coming up, it's pretty crazy. There's been way more attention than we even expected. I think that we're certainly going to set new records. I think for how many players are playing the game, and I just hope that our servers can keep up.
So when you,
I love how every time he's mentioning the servers, he's like, I hope they're gonna manage. Like every single time that comment is brought up, he's always so concerned. And he's like praying the shit's gonna work. I saw a Reddit post. I think it wasn't right. I think I have it up here. Here we go. Here's the image. GGG devs on launch day. This is so good. Sorry, this is gonna be a long one. Let's keep up with the video.
you look at POE2 right now, how close is it to your perfect image or optimistic image of, ideal image of POE2, if you could give it like a number, like a percentage?
It's pretty close now, I would say. Like, definitely, like, if you don't count just the fact that we don't have all the content in terms of the gameplay and feel, I think we're definitely 90% there. The main thing, yeah, we just have to get all that content ready because it's such a huge important part of an action RPG that you need enough content to keep people playing again and again. And the other thing as well is that the next best action RPG, in my opinion, is Path of Exile 1, and we need to make sure that we can compete with it in terms of content as well.
Confirmed, the only ARPG POE2 is competing with is POE1. That's what he said, right? Word for word. Right? He just said the only ARPG that POE2 is competing with is POE1. And we said this multiple times. The only game that POE1 can fight is another POE game. There you go.
One thing
Confirmed,
that some people
100%.
have noticed is that it seems like mostly it is overlap in terms of like mechanisms or
Suffering from
content
success,
POE1
yeah.
to POE2. So in the future, is the plan to always have this kind of overlapping where you're carrying
Competition
things
is so
over
bad
from
you have to do it
POE1,
yourself.
or is it going to continue into completely separate development trees?
We won't necessarily do that, but I think there will be some amount of sharing. It's actually quite nice for us to be able to, tell a story in two parts with POE1 and POE2. So a great example of that was the last league we released called Settlers of Kalgur, where we have, in Act 4 in POE2, we had this city called King's March. And then we decided that in POE1, we wanted to create a league that told the story of how that city came to be. So that's just something that's just a great opportunity when we've got these two games running at the same time. And I think that we'll probably continue doing some interesting things like that. But in terms of the overall gameplay and the way that it feels, the systems are quite different in POE2 to what they are in POE1. So we can't simply just take something from POE1 or POE2 and move them between the games because they require significant changes to be able to, to work inside the gameplay system that each game has.
So this is from the content creators that are attending today. So he's not sure if this was answered before, since you had so many interviews globally, but obviously Mirror of Kalandra was a very iconic item and maybe even currency in POE1. And he's wondering, first of all, does that item exist in
I've
POE2?
always said
And
yes.
If not,
It is.
Oh, yes.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go.
네,
There we go.
일단은 존재한다고 하네요. But
Yes!
are there other items that you think
Mirror
are kind of at
confirmed.
that similar level where
Nice.
the moment you see it, you're like, this is it? Like I won.
Well, hopefully we can design some good unique items that are like that, and ideally from the pinnacle content, we really want all of the uniques that come from that content to feel like you absolutely must have them.
11K hours, still no mirror. I play the game for 10.5 years. I have 2 accounts. I play for north of 28,000 hours. I still haven't dropped a mirror. So get in line, bro.
You know, in order to make it actually worth doing that content. So yeah, I'm hoping our designers are able to come up with some really awesome uniques. And I think what we're doing with uniques as well in PoE2, they can be a lot more interesting, especially with things that can add skills to your character and things like that. So
how many thousands in hideout? Okay, to mind you, I have 28,000. Like it's close to 29,000 last I checked. You can actually send a message to GG support and they can tell you exactly how many hours, because I switched from standalone client to Steam client not long ago, and I have 2 accounts. Mind you, a lot of those hours are AFK hours where I'm doing other things just to be online to get trades, and a lot of it is hideout crafting. So it's not 28,000 hours of just fucking grinding, or 29,000, what the fuck it is. I actually asked them again about it, but it's a lot of hours still.
there's quite a lot more a unique can do in PoE2 than in PoE1.
제가 그 패스오백자이를 10년 넘게 했는데 아직 칼란드라의 거울을 한 번도 못 먹어봤거든요, 땅에서. 패스오백자이 2에서 먹을 수 있을까요?
So 10 years and he still hasn't seen the mirror drop. So do you think he'll have a
There you
chance in
go.
PoE2?
Well, I've never found a legitimate mirror before either.
조나단님도 직접 찾으신 적은 없군요.
But I did have one drop one time when I was using cheats. But I didn't cheat to get it, but I just was killing the monsters with a cheat and I got one. So that's the only one I've ever seen actually drop
그
before.
아이템을 받으려고 한 건 아니고 이제 테스트하면서 치트키로 좀 다른 걸 테스트하고 있었는데 그때는 딱 한 번 보셨다고 합니다. 제 생각엔 이 정도면 네, 뭐 거기까지만. 네. So this question is about kind of the timing. So what is maybe the timeline for early access updates within early access, and then also kind of what's your outlook for the final release, the full release?
So I think that it will take, for the second part, I think that it will definitely take us at least 6 months, but maybe a little bit more to be able to get out of early access. I certainly don't want it to take more than a year. I do want it to be next year that we finish. But as far as the content update goes, it's a little bit hard to say how long. Our original plan was to kind of do them every couple of months. But you know, the studio has been, it's been a lot of work to get to the point of this release, and so we need a little break, I think, around Christmas before we can work out again. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure when the first one will be, but yeah, the intention is effectively to have them every few months. It should feel a little bit like the League updates in PoE1, where they come relatively.
I love that cycle that they're doing. The Fexer guy is down. They took it down. Moving on.
Relatively frequently, and our intention effectively is to add more classes and also more content, you know, the rest of the acts and so on, basically as we go through. One thing I will say is that we want to make sure that by the time we go into full release, that everyone has had an opportunity to playtest all the classes, including all the ascendancy classes and all of these things, because it's very important that we're able to get to testing on all of these things before we actually can be able to do a release.
Gotcha. So this is something that he's come across along with some other fans that he's noticed are very hardcore fans of Path of Exile. And one thing they've noticed is that the crafting system in 2 seems to be a lot more simplified and maybe not as many options as Path of Exile 1. So do you have plans to kind of expand that similarly to PoE1?
So our intention is to expand it over time, but we wanted to make sure that the kind of base level crafting system is easier to use in PoE2. One of the things that I think makes it easier to use actually is the fact that you get more currency and you can use it more often. So that means that...
So basically there's no crafting bench in PoE2, but they're giving us a lot more currency. That what they're hoping to do here is provide us with an opportunity or a situation where the currency sink is actually the players crafting and using the currency. So I'm very, very, very curious to see how this will pan out once we get to play the game.
You're going to be experimenting a lot more with currency just through the game. have different options than what were available in POE1. So I think people probably will take a little bit of time to get used to all of these things. But Path of Exile 1 ultimately is a game that's had more than 10 years of expansions, and it's got a lot of kind of you might call it bloat over that time, where there's lots of crafting systems that kind of overlap, or they do different.
That's why
they do
POE1
different
is so
things,
hard
but
to get
kind of
into.
like they're trying to achieve the same similar results. And we wanted to kind of unify some of that stuff in POE2 in order to make it so that there was just a little bit less of those things that you would need to know about. But obviously, as we add more and more content, and all of these need to have new player power and so on, there will definitely be more options over time. And we're also leaving some design space as well for us to be able to add things in the future too. It's also worth mentioning that we still have more sequels to Path of Exile 1 leagues that we want to add to Path of Exile 2. And when we do those, there will often also be sequels to some of the crafting systems that those they had as well.
So in Path of Exile 1,
Like
one of
Bestiary,
the
maybe.
troubles they had was that new currency kept getting added and added, and it seemed overwhelming. So can we expect maybe slower additions in POE2?
It's a little bit hard to say. I mean, ultimately, anytime we add something, really it comes down to does it seem cool to us? And if it does, then we add it. So, look, we're trying to make sure that it's a little bit more simplified on a base level. But, look, as you add content, you need to add new features, and people want these things. So, I'm sure 10 years from now, there will be it will feel very complicated again.
Okay. So he took some time to kind of gather some different opinions on what would be best to ask you when you had the opportunity today. And one thing that came up continuously was about controller support. Given that it's WASD, some people, they don't like it as much on keyboard, so they would like to use a joystick. So first of all, how much, if at all, is the controller support better in POE2 compared to POE1? And also, how close would you say it is to perfection right now?
So it's way, way better than Path of Exile 1 was. We've got a team now who actually, that's what they spend their time doing. The main thing is that, like in terms of not being perfect, is that every skill requires a lot of specific work in order to be able to actually feel good, especially at endgame. And you also can't necessarily tell whether a skill feels perfect until you've actually played through and kind of actually use it at endgame as well. So I think that there probably will be some skills that could be better. And what am I talking about with this is kind of like, you need to do very specific targeting work, because obviously with a controller you can't select an exact location. So you need to be able to kind of predict exactly where the player would want to use a skill at a given time. And the answer to that is very different depending on how the skill works. So effectively, there's a lot of that work to do, and there's probably still more we can do, but I think that we've done a pretty good job in getting it there. And certainly the base interface for controller is just so much better than it was in Path of Exile 1.
So he remembers he had a chance to try the controller support at Gamescom, and he remembers there were cases like that with targeting where he wanted to hit the boss, but it's hitting mobs. So has it even been improved since then? Do you know?
I mean, there's certainly been a lot of work just on specific skills, but it really is case by case. And the other thing as well, the worst times are when people disagree about what the best way to target is. That's also another tricky question. So the answer to whether it improved depends on what skills you were using. Some of them definitely, I mean, there's been a lot of work on a lot of different ones, but I can't say about the exact skill you were using there.
So I think we discussed this briefly before, but just kind of reminiscing about the idea of a more in-depth or a more specific guide, right? Like blinking lights or something like that on the passive trees or the Atlas tree. And his thought was maybe even just like level 35, something in the middle where you know how to get a jump start. Do you have plans for a guide like that in-game?
So we are doing things where we have specific guidance on individual skills, like we've got videos for each one that explain how they work. We're also doing things like recommending support gems and so on. But I guess we stop shy of wanting to specifically recommend a given build to people, just because we kind of feel like it's really up to the players to decide what they think is good. And if we start specifying specific builds, I worry that they will become either out of date, or people will say, oh, this build sucks, like why is GGG recommending something that's clearly terrible compared to this other build. We sort of hesitate a little bit to get involved in the ring of like what build is best, and we kind of want to leave that to the players more. We're very happy to recommend, explain how things work more, get better at showing what the effect of your choices are, but we just don't really want to sort of say, okay, here's what you should be doing. Actually, even already we had, just with the recommended support gems, we've had people say to us, oh, your idea for this one is terrible. terrible. You should replace it with that other one. There's already some arguments.
So this is a bit of a lighter question, but he remembers when Path of Exile officially released in Korea with Korean service that there was a Korean traditional hat as a cosmetic item. So are there any plans for other maybe traditional Korean garb as cosmetics in PoE2?
I'm sure that we'll get to doing something like this, but one thing to mention is that those items that you had from before will still work in PoE2, so if you might like to use them. I don't know if that particular one will work at the beginning of early access, but by full release, every microtransaction we ever had will work, so you'll still be able to use those. But I'm sure we'll be making more things like this in the future.
So then what about, what's your plans for like the demon form or like the druid when it transforms into different animals? Would those have cosmetics as well?
So we might be able to, we can make cosmetics for the different forms, but obviously the cosmetics that your character normally wears won't work on them.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can't make your bear wear armor that way. Anyway.
Gotcha. But it would be a separate thing that you're.
Yeah,
would
but we
be
can
fun,
do separate things, and we are
MTXs on it would be so cool, like with the different shape-shifting stuff. That would actually be hilarious to see.
planning on doing some of those too.
So then would you imagine that it's like changing what the bear itself looks like? If it's
Yeah, we can absolutely do that, and we definitely will be doing stuff like that.
So he remembers hearing in a different interview that you've done that you also are taking inspiration from other action games and things like that. And a lot of these games, even if they're run in a season format, they tend to have mid-season updates that will keep track of the game. Now, you've mentioned in the past that the benefit of a season system is that you can play the season and then swap to a different game with a different season and go back and forth. But what happens when maybe the season update you had, whether it's something like in POE1, like the Calandra League or the Necropolis League, where it just wasn't received as well, would you be open to this idea of mid-season updates to kind of amend what has already happened in that season?
Generally speaking, we don't like to do that, and that's because, so back in the early days of Path of Exile 1, we actually tried doing more frequent updates and these sorts of things, but we kind of found that they didn't really ultimately cause people to come back. So what we were much better off doing is just coming up with a larger update and trying a different approach and doing something completely new at that point. Occasionally we do modify things in the middle of a season, but generally speaking, we try to really avoid that if it's going to negatively affect people's characters once the game is released. So effectively, yeah, it really is much better, we found, to go all in on like having a larger update every 3 months than it is to kind of do smaller changes in the middle. That being said, I'm sure that when we first launch POE2, there will be many things that we get wrong that we will have to update very quickly. So I'm sure in the first couple of weeks there'll be many small updates just to tweak numbers. No doubt there'll be boss fights that are too hard or skills that that are too weak and things like this. So yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of changes like that at the start.
Yeah, so listening to you, he's inspired now and very proud of POE2 just with the energy that you have.
Okay, that's good to hear.
First of all, there were a lot of questions.
I mean, Jonathan has this childlike burning passion that I think a lot of us just see. As soon as he talks about Path of Exile, he just lights up. And it's so contagious. I love talking to Jonathan about this, off and on screen. It's amazing.
Questions from the exiles that joined us today. So he tried to pick some unique ones, but the first one is in POE1, one of the troubles they had was that you couldn't try on the cosmetics before you purchased it. So is that included in POE2, and if not, are there any plans?
So actually we do have a completely new store in Path of Exile 2, and that store does let you see the items on your character before you buy them, and it also allows you to see like a close-up of your character and this kind of thing as well. So yeah, we've actually done quite a bit of work in that area, so I think players will probably have a much better time with that.
So next is they want to play with their friends, that's their plan, but they haven't found as much information when it comes to co-op or party play. So how does that work? How would you get involved in party play?
Yeah, so you can play right from the beginning of the game with up to 6 players. The game is sort of intended to be balanced so that you can play single player or multiplayer, and you should have a very similar time in terms of the overall difficulty. In multiplayer, during the campaign though, you can resurrect your friends. So that means that you don't have to leave them behind if they die. So yeah, that can be quite a fun experience. When you get to the end game, you can't can't resurrect them anymore, so you actually have to make sure you're able to all survive a map in order to get through it. But yeah, we try to make sure that the game is balanced for both experiences without having regard from one, without making sure that one or the other is advantaged.
Maps and bosses only having one try, and otherwise even the pinnacle
This
bosses
is
you
gonna
have to
be
kind
an
of build up
interesting
again
question.
to revisit them. And this might be a bit too daunting for newer players or kind of middle level players, where if I die I have to kind of go through the entire process again to try to challenge this boss again in the end game. So are there any plans to try to mitigate that in the future?
So I think if you're talking about the actual pinnacle bosses, the intention really is that is the content that only the very good players are able to achieve. That's kind of the what pinnacle ultimately means. So if you're talking about the early end game, losing a map is not really a big deal. Like, you get plenty of them. It's absolutely fine. It only really starts to matter as you get towards that pinnacle content, where it requires quite a lot to be able to challenge that stuff. So effectively, yeah, I mean, we kind of want it that way, and I believe that it will mean that achieving victory against the pinnacle bosses will be a much more valuable achievement than it was in Path of Exile 1.
So this is a question about the combat, but for instance, something like a pure melee build or something like that, or maybe some elements being a little bit too strong, where physical damage was really only used to destruct things, right, and to fragment things when they're frozen or something like that. So what has been designed in POE2 to kind of balance out melee and different elements and all those types of builds?
I mean, I guess it's a little bit hard to answer that fully, but ultimately, it's not necessarily important that every element is balanced against each other. The key thing is that we're giving you lots of different tools to solve different problems. So in Path of Exile 2, because you can have many more skills that are 6 links, it means that it's okay to have skills that are just only occasionally useful. And so we can do things like, I like to have skills that are just situational.
So basically, what he's talking about here, and he's probably going to say this as well, is the whole idea of you having like 1 or maybe 2 main skills you use for clearing, maybe 1 or 2 main skills you use to single target or rare boss fights, and then you have these utility options. Let's say you're playing a merc, or you're playing with a crossbow. You have like a main attack you do for damage. Then you have utility options, maybe one for controlling packs of enemies to keep you safer, another one that makes the enemies shocked, so they take more damage, that you use to keep them shocked and then use your main source of damage. So that's kind of like how the gameplay combat will feel in PoE2, where that's the kind of playstyle they were aiming for to achieve.
Situational, right? Like, you feel like, oh, this is the perfect time to use this, so that's when I use it. And so effectively, I think it's a mistake if you're a player to be like, okay, I'm a fire sorcerer, so I'm only going to go fire, right? Like, this is the kind of thing that, I mean, you can do that, but I think you're going to have a worse time than if you try to combo things between different elements. So I guess what I'm saying is that the elements aren't necessarily balanced in the way that you're kind of suggesting. It's like, it's more that each skill needs to have a place and a time to use it correctly.
Just one aspect of that question I want to follow up on is, so what about specifically when it comes to melee? Like, how useful are melee skills outside of just being supplemental to others?
Oh, I mean, I definitely think melee skills are very useful. They're incredibly strong, generally speaking, relative to ranged. Like, that you definitely get the payoff for being
That's
in melee
a good
range.
answer.
A lot of
Melee lovers and
bosses are
rejoice.
actually much easier to fight in melee than they are in ranged, because the skills the bosses choose to use are different, and also because the any kind of attack that involves hitting an arc, it's much easier to avoid. So, for example, with the boss I was just fighting, which I did admittedly die to, it's actually much easier if you stay very close to the boss, because his abilities, when he's targeting you, you can dodge around the boss very easily when you're very close, but when you're far away, it's actually much harder to dodge those abilities. So melee is actually quite an advantage in that regard too.
So Path of Exile is known for its economy in some ways, and it's very detailed and it's very complex. And you've done quite a good job in kind of creating this capitalism economy amongst themselves in the barter system. So is there anyone on the team that majored in econ, or maybe you have a team that's dedicated to how to manage the economy?
We don't have a dedicated team or anything like that, but I think that, look, we've always been huge believers in the sort of free market economy in these games. I think it's what really gives items the value that they have. So, it's just something that, we have a policy of we never bind any items, and that's so that...
Chris Wilson said many years ago that economy in a game like this is a very, very, very touchy and very sensitive topic. And it needs to be handled with care and a lot of respect. And the integrity of said market and economy needs to be dealt with in a very good way. It's super important. And because of that, they've shown that they are very adamant about keeping the integrity. So when someone gets like a dupe or something, ban hammers are flying. You're not allowed to abuse the shit. Like, it's very simple. Unlike other games that don't do this, then the markets get ruined and the economy is completely destroyed. That doesn't happen in PoE to that extent. Not at all. They get attended to, and quickly so, and effectively. And they've shown this. So when people find abuses and exploits and whatnot, they are now seeing a track record of how PoE is dealing with it. So if they start abusing it, they can expect to get a slap on their wrists. I'm going to get a drink. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
That everyone can feel like, yeah, like, once again, your items have value. The part then that I think did help is having a good understanding of stock markets when we're implementing the currency exchange system. You know, that one, if you actually get right down to it, is like a full stock market type situation. So having some understand, I did have a bit of understanding about that when we went to implement it, and I think that was very useful.
So in POE1, it was, you know, the lore and the story and all of this world building was so fragmented that oftentimes people had to go to, you know, third-party tools like, you know, databases, things like that. So are there any plans to maybe implement a type of wiki or something like that, whether it's in-game or something more easily accessible for people?
Well, I hope we're doing a much better job of just storytelling in general in POE2 than we were in POE1. We don't have like a lore book or something like that, but it actually is something that I would be keen to do, to have a place so that you can see all of the conversations that you had and all of the lore objects that you found. We don't have it yet, but it is something that I think will be that'll be quite nice to do.
You know, POE1, essentially, they threw together a story in the start just to push the player forward. And then they evolved that story as the game progressed and evolved. POE2, they actually have a proper team working on creating a cool and good story. That's the difference. POE1 had the story just to help have an excuse to push the player forward. POE2 has an actual campaign with an actual story you're actually playing. So that's why a lot of people don't care about the story in POE1, and that's very obvious. But in POE2, it'll be very different. I'm actually, for once in my life, interested in actually exploring the story of POE2, and I never cared about that before.
All right, so we'll see if you can answer this one. But they're wondering, as you operate Path of Exile, have you guys ever done these kind of like phantom nerfs that just weren't public, whether it's about drop rates or tweaking values?
Tweaking drop rates, I know for a fact that they do before, not during launches, not during, but before a new league, they do tweak these numbers. I know that for a fact.
Without telling people.
But they don't tell people about them.
I'll
Because they're not public info.
I will say not really. There might be a few cases where the players would argue that there was a change that wasn't noted, but generally speaking, we do try to be transparent. But
they do tell us when they make changes. They do. But drop rates and whatnot, they have tweaked them in the past. But they only do that before a league launch, not during. Never during. And the times where they make drastic changes and whatnot, they always tell us that they have made changes. It's a long time ago, but they have.
But I will be honest and say there might have been a couple of cases where there are a few minor tweaks without mentioning it to anyone. But generally speaking, we try to make sure we tell everyone about these things.
So in Path of Exile 2, are there any weapons that are specialized that you need certain requirements for that are very unique in that sense of their design, similar to some of the late game items in POE1?
I guess not exactly. There are definitely going to be uniques that are kind of hard to build for because they require, as you might say, some sort of special requirements for them. But I mean, ultimately, I guess not exactly. It's mostly just that, there are just some uniques that are just hard to build for because they require certain things of your character that may be difficult to meet.
But you have items like Headhunter and Mageblood in POE1 that were kind of these must-haves that you wanted to chase for. So are there any of those in early access in POE2? And if so, could you maybe give us a hint on what they're like?
I don't really want to spoil any specific uniques right now because it's one of those things that we have very tight control over the spoilers of these. But look, there are a lot of uniques that are returning in POE2. One of the things that we want to do is kind of try to surprise people with how we have adapted some of the mechanics when they don't directly translate. I don't think that we have a Mage Blood replacement at the moment, because obviously, you know, the flask system changed quite a lot last minute. So we don't have that one yet, but there are, you know, like, I know I probably shouldn't say anything.
Probably, but you should.
Yeah, obviously,
Tell
look,
us,
we want
Jonathan.
to make really
Tell
chase
us.
uniques. Like, that's our goal. So hopefully you'll enjoy the ones we have put in there.
So when it comes to skills that are just underused or maybe forgotten, what are your plans? What's the philosophy, and how do you patch those? How do you update them? How often?
Well, I mean, so every time we do a patch for Path of Exile 1 as well, and what we will do in POE2, is we always look at the various data websites that exist that sort of show you like what things are popular and what things aren't. And we're always focusing on the things that are underutilized in order to buff them. So I have no doubt that we'll be doing the same thing in PoE2. Like, it's much better to buff the weak things than it is to nerf the powerful things. People obviously feel a lot better about that. So yeah, ideally we can do that. But I will say,
It's funny that they say, because they actually have a track record of not doing that. They have a track record of actually shifting their... When they shake their metas, they always nerf the top shift. Then they buff some of the underused stuff. But they have a track record history of actually nerfing the high-end outliers. But it is better, everyone's been saying, it's better if you just buff the low end, right? But they do have a track record of the opposites. Or not opposite,
say though
nerfing
that
the high
it's
end.
okay for there to be in PoE2 for there to be some skills that don't see a huge amount of use. Like, we design the game a lot like how when you're making a game like Magic the Gathering, like a card game, where some things exist to be combo pieces that maybe they have not found the rest of the combo yet, and so it's okay for things like that to exist, so that you know, people later on realize what the use is, or we add a unique and it adds a use for it, and these sort of things. So you know, it's okay to have a few underutilized things like that.
MTG mentioned. I mean, the founders of GGG involves individuals such as Brian Weissman. You guys know who Brian Weissman is? This is Brian Weissman. He's one of the founders. He's a former MTG Pro player. For those of you who remembers this guy, he's from the middle of the 90s. He's one of the founders of Grinding Gear Games as well. Like, they're all MTG fans. Chris Wilson, oh my god, I've held Brian Weissman's Legacy tournament deck, which costs a stupid amount of money. He just brought it out, gave it to me, and I'm like standing there with this deck of cards in my hands, and I'm like, oh my god. And I start like checking the cards. I'm being so careful. He didn't even fucking double sleeve them. And I'm like, okay. I gave it back very carefully to him. Like, oh shit, that was so cool. And Chris has a binder with failed prints of cards that he's collecting. It's so cool. And I believe I don't remember exactly. I might be wrong on when it was, but I think that when they sold shares to Tencent or whatever it was, one of them, I don't remember who it was, but one of them bought a, what was it, 9.5 graded Black Lotus or something, and then they went to eat at some restaurant, and they had this graded card in its plastic box on the table whilst they were eating. A 9.5 graded Black Lotus. It's like they're big MTG fans.
That just to exist to be interesting things for people to discover later.
They're not quite sure if you really prefer buffs over nerfs from their experience.
I don't think so.
So POE1, it's kind of infamous for needing so many third-party tools. So you've continuously said that you've really tried to fix or amend a lot of that in POE2. So could you give us a detailed example of what's changed to mitigate that?
So the main thing that we're trying to do is provide better information in the game client for the items that you have. So there's a few ways we do that. So one of them is just the hovers that you, the advanced skill information that you can get from a skill. We show a lot more information, something that you might ordinarily have needed to use a third-party tool to get. This includes things like, information about minions and information about all the different components of a skill, like these kinds of things. So we're trying to be a lot better with that. The other thing as well that we're doing is when it's possible on the skill tree to see what effect that a given skill will have on your character. So it's a lot easier to sort of find out how that works in advance as well. What I will say though is that I'm sure that people will still want to be using things like Path of Building, because what Path of Building lets you do that we will never let you do is try out a build that you don't have the items for, and that's something we would never want to allow
Theoretically
people to do.
try it out.
But yet, you know, obviously people will want that kind of thing.
Theoretically
so
try
I'm
it
sure
out.
those tools will still be things that have a use, and some people will say that those tools are mandatory, but I guess I don't fully agree with that, because I think that the game is one where you want to explore and find the
Oh, that's
interesting
just
combos.
PR,
So,
Jonathan.
you know, I guess
That's
that's our
PR.
position on it anyway. Oh, and by the way, people who
That is PR. I'm confident Mark would have a different take on that. I'm confident Mark would have a different take on that. Just saying.
work on those tools,
I'm
have
sure
been
it's
an amazing
different in
source of
POE2
new
though.
game developers for us, because they already understand all the stats already.
So POE2.cap was capped at 30 million, but was that going to increase?
You know, I actually don't.
Isn't it 35.8 million? Or actually 35.78, because it's what, 12 trillion or something, right? Per minute. Something like that. Divided by 60 puts you at 35.78 million per second, which is the highest dot cap. And that also means that that is the highest amount of damage you can pull in a 1 second window, right? And the damage cap for every single instance is like 12 trillion or something, because of the how the game is designed.
Don't really know the answer to this question. I believe that the cap for this was not really like a game design thing. It was more of a technical thing with how the stats are represented internally. So I think it's kind of one of those random things. Hopefully it wouldn't be necessary anymore. But ideally you shouldn't run into these kinds of problems. It was more of just a technical issue.
So mounts. So are there any thoughts behind mounts and how those might be implemented or used?
So we do have the one rower mount that's used on the Ranger mostly, but we don't have any others at the moment. They're not like a general system, if you know what I mean, like they're used for specific purposes. I think it would be cool to add more later on, but you know, we've got a few ideas for what we might do, but for now we just have that one, and that will do for now, I think.
Any ideas on how that can be continued to be developed, even just the one?
I mean, like for that one mount, but what it does effectively is allows you to bypass the other slowdown that you would normally get when you're firing arrows, and so that one, like doing that is like, to be honest, it's like very overpowered. We need to actually be careful that the downside is good is enough, because yeah, it really makes you very, very fast. If we were doing another mount, I'd be keen to do a mount that is more for melee characters, but there's be quite a lot of work to do something like that. Yeah, I'm interested in doing it. We just haven't got anything yet.
Will guilds be transferable from 1 to 2? And also, are there any
They've answered this already, because we're going to be connected to the same chat. When you're playing POE2 and you have another player in your guild playing POE1, you're still connected to the same guild and the same guild chats.
thoughts
At least that's
behind
what they
guild-specific challenges?
So
Ooh,
the
that was a
guilds
good
are
question.
actually not currently combined with POE1 and 2.
But
it's
they
something
are?
that I would have liked to do, but unfortunately, like
That's a different answer, because last time I spoke to him about this, they said that they would be.
was a little bit technically challenging for a few reasons. So yeah, the guilds are actually separated. As for guild-specific challenges, that is something that I'm interested in, but the problem is that we generally have a rule that all the content that it's in the game has to be completable either single player or multiplayer, as I was saying before. So if we do guild-specific challenges, what I worry about is then people will feel pressured to join a guild just so that they can do those things, and that's kind of something that we want to not necessarily make people have to do.
So this one, there's a lot of emotional baggage here, but I think some people already know the answer. In Path of Exile 2, do you still need to go through all the acts every season?
Yes, you do. And as I've always maintained, that I think it's a huge part of the reason why Path of Exile 1 still set its highest record of players
Didn't he
in the
say
most
this
recent
already?
season. There's very few games that do that, and I think a lot of the reason is because if you want to have a game where you need to, I think it is important that you have a game where each new season you feel like you're on the level.
Isn't this literally earlier in the video, or am I going crazy? I'm getting the worst fucking deja vu feelings here. Like this exact question with this exact answer. The Matrix. It was an insert before the intro. Okay, thank fuck, dude. Man, I thought I was going crazy here. Are we even real?
Level playing field with everyone else, and the moment that you don't have the need to go through the campaign again, then other players will feel left behind. So I think that like in the short term, you certainly can annoy some people with that, but in the long term, I think it's much better for the health of the game.
유배자 대표로 나와서 또 저희를 도와주신 NPC님 너무 감사드리고요. 이렇게 또 인터뷰를 진행해봤는데 이런 인터뷰를 몇 번 해봤지만 이렇게 시원한 답변을 들은 적이 사실 몇 번 없었거든요. 물론 방금 질문은 제외하고요.
Japanese sounds so cool. It's so fast as well. I never learned Japanese. I think it's a pretty cool language.
So he's.
Oh, it's Korean?
Like,
oh my god, I'm so sorry. Don't cancel me, please. I am so sorry. Fuck. Well, in that case, Korean sounds cool. Okay? Korean sounds cool. Shit. I don't know. I don't speak any of the Asian languages. I speak quite a few languages, but not that. I am so sorry. Korean sounds cool then. Fuck, man.
like this, but he's never felt so.
Well, he's right though, because like Japanese is more like rough, right? He sounds so happy when he's talking. Japanese cooler. I don't know the difference, so I can't say. I know that Korean written has more like circular symbols in it. I know that. That I know. I am so sorry. I did not know. Korean sounds pretty goddamn cool though.
Kind of relieved about all the answers, except for maybe the last one, because it's kind of the expected.
I'm gonna move on
answer.
before I cancel myself worse.
So we heard that you have to
Make it
get
worse
moving
here.
again.
Yes, I'll be flying out this evening, and then as soon as I get back, you know, I've got a lot more work to make sure the servers can stay up for everyone who wants to play.
오늘 저녁에 바로 다시 복귀하셔가지고 이제 남은 일주일 동안 서버가 안전한지 괜찮은지 모든 유저분들이 즐기실 수 있도록 준비해야만
You're
합니다.
happy that I was talking. It sounds cool.
바쁜 일정 중에도 와주셔서 너무
German
감사드리고요.
sounds so
오늘
angry.
함께해주신 유배자분들, 그리고 시청자분들, 그리고 초보라님, 그리고 조나단님 모두 너무
I'm gonna stop
감사드립니다.
talking
저는
now.
진행의 게이머빈이었습니다.
All right, so now it's just his thoughts. We don't have to go through that. This is going to be a long video either way. Again, I'm going to link this in the YouTube and the Twitch chats. Here it is. This is from Gaming Red-Handed. There's an English cut of this interview with Kakao Games. Do give them a like. Do check it out. Subscribe to the video. Leave a comment down below. And don't forget to hit the like button. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for this content as well. I think it was pretty cool. There's a lot of things that we haven't seen answers to. The guild question was a little bit off for me because they've said that they were going to connect it because they're moving all of the MTXs to be usable in POE1 or 2 as well. And that included guild, and that means that guilds had to still exist. Because like I bought all of the guild member swaps. We have tons of guild-specific stash tabs and whatnot. What's going to happen to those? I wish they would have done a follow-up question to that with what's going to happen with that, since they now have deemed that it's not technically possible. What's going to happen with all of those things? Maybe guild leaders still have it? Maybe. I don't know. I have no idea. We'll see. Anyways, hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and leave a comment down below what you thought of the interview, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe. Keep rocking.